Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I want to welcome everyone. Thank you to the participants we have here for joining our session today with the World Agriculture Forum. And our session today is the Conservation Agriculture Seminar on Nurturing the Soil and the Future. This is a topic that is quite close to me as an active farmer rancher in the United States. And I think we're going to have a great exchange of ideas today. I would add too that our session is under the umbrella of the World Agriculture Forum group, the Sustainable Ag Practices group, and of which the members are here. And this is the fourth session in the series that's been conducted by the parent organization, the World Agriculture Forum. So grateful to have that opportunity. And I would like to thank, first of all of you for joining today. It's morning here in the United States, Thanksgiving Day, which is somewhat interesting because back when this country was founded, really not too long ago, the principles of conservation were actually practiced by the first settlers that came here from Europe. Needed the help of some of the indigenous people to get some plant nutrients into the soil for the crops that they planted. So they used fish. They planted fish along with their crops in order to promote the growth. And so that was actually one of the first conservation practices that occurred in this country back in at the end of the 1600s. So kind of an interesting point. I want to thank we have two very prominent speakers today, and I'll add some comments as well. But I want to recognize Dr. Rashid Merabat, who is I think is back online with us now. We had a few difficulties, but I should be back in order. And also Saidi Makamwa, two very well-noted speakers, which I will get to introducing them here in a second. And also my thanks to Adel Zaged Tahiri, who's done a great deal of work along with the World Agriculture Forum to get all this set up. So with that, Dr. Rashid, are you present? Yeah, I think you might be muted. Okay, there you go.
Yes.
Back with us. Thank you. There's been a great deal of talk around the world about conservation, about policy, about implementing those things, and the World Agriculture Forum has certainly been in the midst of all of that to try to look at these very important issues and to see what we can do to promote conservation, and along with that sustainability, and those things work hand in hand. So we're going to be taking a look today at a number of those areas, and it's a very wide and broad area for all of us around the world in all ag production areas. And so we can't possibly get into all of these areas. We'll give overview, and I hope, and our hope for the panel is that the questions and comments that come in, if you would be kind enough to enter those into the chat area of the Zoom meeting here. We will allocate some time after each speaker to maybe look at a few, but more importantly, at the end of the speaker presentations, we'll see if we can address a few of your comments and questions. If not, I believe that all of us here are available offline should you wish to follow up and gain more information and a few responses. So please feel free to do that too. Okay, so with that, we're back to Rashid. I don't know if you heard, but we were kind of shuffling a little bit to see if you weren't able to get back online. Saidi has agreed to go first, but if you're ready to go, we can go with that as well. Are you prepared?
I think if Adil will share in my place the presentation, I will go ahead. If not, we can, because I'm trying to share it, but it's not working as I wish. But
okay.
Not yet.
Adil, you have it, my presentation?
No, not yet. Let Saidi start.
Okay, Saidi, if you would, please. Appreciate you getting us started here. And I will, I'd like to introduce Saidi. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the African Conservation Tillage Network, a Pan-African nonprofit organization that has promoted sustainable agriculture for quite some time, primarily through using conservation ag and sustainable ag mechanization. He serves as the technical secretary of the International Conservation Ag Advisory Panel for Africa, the ICAAP, and is a member of the Engineers Registration Board for Tanzania and a Club of Bologna. Saidi is an engineer by training. Formerly, he was a principal ag engineer, researcher, and educator in Tanzania's Ministry of Agriculture. He holds a master's degree in ag engineering from the University of Guelph in Canada and a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Dar es Salaam. He has over 70 publications on conservation ag and sustainable mechanization. And for a number of years, since 2008, he has successfully led a number of regional ag development projects to support smallholders across many parts of Africa in collaboration with governments, development partners, private sector actors, UN agencies, CIGAR centers, and NGOs. So with that, Saidi, great way to start into this very important area of conservation ag.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you so much to the organizers, World Agriculture Forum, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My colleague Rashid was to start with the global overview, but I will start with Africa and will present the global context later. So it's about promoting conservation agriculture for a resilient food security and economic growth in Africa. On the webinar, Conservation Agriculture for Nurturing the Soil and the Future. I will quickly cover on the role, opportunities, and challenges of agriculture in the continent, why we need conservation agriculture, talk about some adoption trends, some lessons learned from the decade of implementing conservation agriculture, why CA needs to be promoted with mechanization, the essence of enterprise diversification, particularly for smallholders, and some facts, examples on how CA works and what benefits it brings to the communities, followed by some call to action, and very briefly about the network itself. So agriculture is very important for Africa, predominantly because it's a livelihood for the majority of the people, 80% or so. It contributes anywhere from 15 to 60% of GDPs of many countries. And looking forward, there are massive opportunities for farmers in Africa. One is the urbanization, where the food market is expected to grow by 250 million by 2030. And these are people who are not farming. They basically are looking to buy food from farmers. That Africa is 60% of the total global and cultivated cropland, the youngest continent in terms of age, and to double by 2040. But for Africa to harness these opportunities, it has to overcome several critical challenges. One of the challenges is the generally stagnant yields in the past 50 years, albeit some successes here and there, but the general average of cereal yields in Africa have not improved. And secondly, there are the issues of land resource degradation, the loss of biodiversity. There are issues of acidification coming up, issues of soil erosion, issues of pollinators declining. Needless to say, of the challenges of climate change, where the predictability of rainfall is no longer possible, the issue of the youths not wanting to be involved in farming, not because they hate it, but they hate the poverty and the adverseness of labor inherent with the handhold-based farming system. And another challenge is a number of farmers are still doing farming as a livelihood that is delinked from new technologies, delinked from modern inputs and produce markets. What does history tell us? We can learn from history. We can learn from the American Dust Bowls in the 1930s, which basically brought the birth of conservation agriculture. We can learn from the Green Revolution in Asia, particularly in Punjab, where we are informed that due to extensive irrigation that managed to increase the area under irrigation from 56% in the 70s to 71% in the 2015. It has also increased the depth of tube wells from 15 meters to 40 meters. So it means the availability of water for irrigation, you have to dig deeper and deeper. And that is a big challenge that we have to look at how we address it. On the other side, with regard to mechanization, we are reminded by history again that in the 1960s, Africa had more tractors in use than Brazil, than India and China. Fast forward 40 years later, there are almost 7 times the number of tractors in India compared to the number of tractors in Africa. There are 4.5 times the number of tractors in China and 3.7 times the number of tractors in Brazil compared to Africa. So over 40 years, Africa has not only stagnated in terms of farm power, it has actually gone back to the 1960s. So this is the Dust Bowl I talked about, but what is key here is it gave the birth to the principles of conservation agriculture, avoiding or minimizing soil disturbance, maximizing soil cover, diversifying crop rotations or associations, and overarching all these 3 principles is the use of good agronomic practices. So the good agronomic practices are encompassing the 3 fundamentals principles. Now going to Africa, trying to take a look at what has been the adoption trends, we are seeing that CA adoption in Africa has been at an exponential increase. Looking at the number of countries in the 2008, 2009, 9 countries were adopting conservation agriculture. It increased, it more than doubled in 5 years to 14 countries. And then we had 25 countries in the 2018, 2019.
Saidi, excuse me for one moment. Could we please go back to Saidi's presentation? We have the next speaker's slide deck on my screen anyway. And could we return to the previous slide presentation?
Okay. Oh, okay. I see Rashid is here. Sure.
Anyway, please continue if you would, Saidi, and maybe we can work this out.
Oh, all right. So you say I should continue?
If you're able to, and while we work to get your initial presentation back up on screen as it was.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right.
I think Adele had started sharing Rashid's slides. So maybe, Saidi, you can put up your slides again now and go back to whatever slide you were on.
Is it
Oh.
visible?
Yes, it is now on my screen. Is everyone else able to see the first presentation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, okay. All right. So that's where we are on the adoption trends. And I've just explained the countries from 9 to 14 to 25. But in terms of area, we had close to 500,000 in the 2008, which increased to almost 1 million by 2013. It doubled basically in 5 years. And we are now talking about 3.5 million hectares. So that's a substantive increase in the area under conservation agriculture. And where is this adoption happening? So you can see the biggest area is in South Africa, 51%, Zambia. And South Africa, this is basically a large-scale commercial. Zambia is a mixture of large-scale commercial and smallholders, Mozambique, smallholders, Ghana, Malawi, and so on. So 3.5 million hectares of croplands, which is about 3.6 of the cultivated area. And we are excluding here tree crops. However, there are hotspots that we must emphasize. The hotspots include the areas of South Africa, where in some provinces, CA accounts to 50% of the cropland being under conservation agriculture. I had just explained this doubling of the area under CA every 5 years. But the other disaggregation that would be of interest is knowing between smallholders, medium scale, and large, what is happening. And you find smallholders managing that 1% of the area is by smallholders. Large-scale farmers, they manage almost 68%. So there's a glaring gap. The medium-scale farmer, that somebody with a tractor, they are not featuring at all. So we are talking of large-scale commercial farmers managing 68%, and the very smallholders with 1 hectare owning 31%. And 99% of these farmers are basically smallholders owning 1 hectare. Again, globally, we're informed. I think Rashid will talk about this. 15% of the cropped area. We mentioned about Africa. We are talking about 3 million farmers in Africa. And the smallholders are basically using hand tools. And a few of them hiring tractors for the operations. And the CA is mainly happening in the cereals, mainly maize, wheat, beans, and sorghum, and a little bit in oilseeds that are intercropped or in relay to the cereals. There is negligible focus on livestock feeds production and forages production. And I must state here, the data we are presenting does not include woody perennials like tea, coffee, cocoa, or oil palm. This is a learning curve. On the lessons learned, the lessons on innovations, on policy institutions reform is referring to Tanzania. I'm not going to push you to read that. The key messages are summarized here. So you look at the key drivers and you find CA contributes to alleviation of livelihood and poverty. The key players being NGOs and development partners, the government basically initially being aloof, just watching. Adoption barriers is low awareness, lack of mechanization support. Key success factors is increased productivity and resilience against climate factors. And the policy environment was looking at the agenda to reduce poverty and focus on livelihoods of poor farmers. However, and you can see the funding instruments, it was mainly international agencies and NGOs. However, as the proof of concept was confirmed, now the agenda is broadening to include benefits to soil health, environmental impact, and enhanced climate resistance. When people are seeing the benefits, the agenda is widening. Bring on board government policy support, particularly to bring on board the medium and large-scale farmers who were not targeted in the first services, but also in terms of adoption barriers, there is the need to create demand for services and develop conducive enabling environment, including incentives to farmers, service providers, and machinery manufacturers. Now, the challenges are coming, which require specific machines that are needed by the smallholders, and that require the manufacturers and the also the research institutions to come on board. So those are the changes that are coming, basically from what was an experimental livelihood strategy to become a mainstreaming agenda to bring conservation agriculture into the mainstream policy and the institutional agenda. But I'm bringing this specific slides that for Africa, we have realized over the past 25 years that the network has been around, that we need to promote conservation agriculture with mechanization, because you are talking of minimum soil disturbance, and this requires specialized equipment. Without the specialized equipment, if farmers have to depend on the handhold, it becomes unrealizable. 65% of the area under cultivation in Africa is still by the human muscle handhold. This is unattractive to the youth. Without mechanization, even organic amendments, when you want to use rock phosphates, you want to spread manure, it becomes too laborious, too expensive. And we have policy in terms of policies, the African Union framework for sustainable agricultural mechanization with the targets to put the handhold. What does tillage, what are the no tillage solutions? We have all the array of implements, from the hand jab planters to animal drone equipment, tractor drone, and so on. But the trend is to move from hand and animal to motorized. Does CA work? How are the benefits? I think I will talk more about this in the next slides. But evidence from the research and scientific parameters proves that CA works for the adaptation of climate smart agriculture. It works in the mitigation areas. It also works in achievement of national goals. And how it works, there are so many parameters, but which I can allude to a few using the practical examples. One of the mechanisms for mitigating climate change is when you use soil cover. You are basically increasing the soil organic matter level, and that way you are increasing the CO2 sequestration in the soil. The soil becomes a sink. When you are minimizing soil disturbance, you are not breaking the soil aggregates, so you are preventing the release of CO2. When you are suppressing soil disturbance, you are reducing the number of operations, thus reducing the amount of fuel that you would have used, and eventually reducing the CO2 emissions that would have otherwise gone into the atmosphere. And from the vehicles itself, by not plowing the soil or by reducing these fossil fuel consumptions, you are enabling the soil to sequester and store a lot of carbon. But a number of well-known principles, this is not a new principle, is the very old findings that with the increase in soil organic matter due to non-tillage of the soil or due to the use of cover crops, you are now able to store a lot of water in the soil. The soil becomes a sponge that absorbs moisture, stores it there, and plant roots can utilize it in terms of when there are dry spells. This is a study conducted by the African Conservation Tillage Network and the European Conservation Agriculture Federation, done in 2018. And we found that if the continent was to promote conservation agriculture, it will increase its capacity to 533 metric tons of CO2 per year, which is about 145 metric tons of carbon per year. It was a meta-analysis based on existing literature and so on. So it shows that if we are able to translate the conservation agriculture into practices, then we'll be able to reduce the use the soil as a carbon store. This is an example from a farm very close here in Kenya called Madrugada. And they say a photo tells 1,000,000 words, 1,000 words. But the photo you see on the left, you pass by a vehicle here and dust was blowing. But exactly, it was on that residue-covered field, which was under CA for 7 years, where it was planted because the date for planting had arrived. It was 19th February 2019. And the place, there had been no rain for the past 3 months. And unfortunately, it didn't rain because of climate change issues. And 1 month later, this was the maize crop, 92% emergency, still no rain. The crop continued like that until the silking stage. That's when it rained. So the neighboring farmers actually got zero crop because they could not plant. And when they planted, there was no more rain. But with this crop here, these farmers were able to get a crop. And the only reason is because after doing CA for 7 years, they had already improved their soil organic matter content to some level that the soil was able to store moisture. It's actually a system that I thought, when I took those pictures early, I thought it was a coincidence, but it's a system that when they harvest, the day of harvesting is actually the day of planting. So they will use a combine with a spreader of the straw, and then immediately behind there is the seeder. After harvesting, there is a seeder that will come and plant in the straw because they have developed enough soil moisture storage capabilities in the soil. This is an observation from a number of our studies on the same type of plots, on the same type of seeds being used, the same amount of treatments. And you can see the very stark differences due to CA. And the question maybe to you, colleagues, is how else? What other evidence do we need to convince our leaders and our investors that CA works and it is the option they should support? With CA, we are we have the promise of turning semi-arids into grain basket. This is an example work we did with Agra here in a county called Laikipia in Kenya, semi-arid. And it was very harsh conditions, but you can see conservation agriculture with mulch was able to produce something like 2.1 tons per hectare, while the farmer's practice was hardly at about 1 ton per hectare. This is the semi-arid, by the way. So 2 tons per hectare, average of 6 seasons. These farmers were celebrating. What is the magic? You could see here that maize yield increased by 56% due to the effect of crop residues alone. The effect of fertilizer on crop yield was 84%. Of course, there are issues of cost. What the message here is in the semi-arids, where moisture stress is the biggest issue, the effect of crop residues, the effect of CA is far more pronounced. And if farmers can get crop residues at far lesser costs, and be able to get some fertilizers, it will truly boost their productivity. With the CA, we can reduce or even eliminate the need for land preparation and heavy digging, labor requirements by 50%, which should be of interest to the youth. We talked about the water holding capacity. I'm not going to bring that to talk more about that, but you have the opportunity to bring new land, the 60% land that's uncultivated, into orderly production, as opposed to this old slash and burn or shifting cultivation systems. We can reduce the use of agrochemicals because we are able to use organic amendments, nitrogen fixing leguminous cover crops. We are able now to transport and spread even the manure, which sometimes is available in plenty. But we are also reminded, if we were to spread 10 tons per hectare of manure on 1 hectare, and your only tool was a bucket on the 20 kg bucket on the head, you will need to walk 40 kilometers to spread that 10 tons of manure on 1 hectare.
Saidi, excuse me if we could, but we're fast approaching the end of our first segment for you. If you would be so kind, please.
Yes, I will just conclude. So the last intervention is we require enterprise diversification and the opportunities for economic growth. So the question is, CA saves time, but what is CA if it's done only for a monomodal crop area where the crop cycle is only 3 months? What do farmers do for the rest 8 months of the year if it's only crop production? So diversification is important. We must look at intensifying, planting 2 or 3 crops in the same year using the residual moisture. We need to look at how they can diversify to all year investments using small stock like poultry and so on. These are examples of landscape restoration. I won't go into it. The call to action is further support to CA with mechanization for increased productivity, sustainability, and resilience. CA with mechanization in Africa can also be a social development paradigm. Improved competitiveness, but also regional cooperation and networking. Specifics include regional demonstration farms, improved knowledge sharing through the different platforms, and of course, more investment. So that's basically it. We're a network, 25 years old, and this is our setup with 2 panels, one on conservation agriculture and one on sustainable agricultural mechanization. I will stop there. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Saidi, for that very insightful look into the world of conservation ag in Africa. Again, such a large land area with so much change that's possible. Given the right drivers and the right incentives. I must say, when with your slide of the massive soil erosion in the farm from the 1930s, that is not far from where I'm at right now. That picture was taken, and my parents lived through the Dust Bowl years, a terrible ecological disaster in this region of North America. So those stories are quite vivid, and thank you so much for bringing them to mind. So with that, I have a couple of other points. Real quick, I just wanted to ask. I had an idea that for the smallholders to rely on each other to share information and stuff, do they have some means of peer-to-peer contact or some group that could facilitate that?
Yes. So what we are doing to enable smallholders to share information, one is they need to see. For farmers, seeing is believing. So we conduct a lot of farmer field schools, demonstration plots through the different programs that are supported, being conducted together with the national governments and development partners. So that is the most important tool that is valued by smallholders. They want to see, and then they can feel, touch, and ask questions. And through demonstration plots with partners. This one we are doing with a number of the not-for-profit organizations in the continent that are working with us, with a lot of the agricultural universities. And yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. So our next speaker is getting ready to present to us. And so I will start with his introduction. Thank you so much, Saidi. Our next presenter is Dr. Rashid Murabit. He is the research director at the Institute of National Research for Agronomy, INRA in Morocco. And Dr. Murabit is an internationally recognized expert in agronomy, soil science, climate change, and conservation agriculture. His training involves a PhD in agronomy from Colorado State University, not far from where I am, and a master's degree in soil physics from a joint program through IAV Hassan II and the University of Minnesota. Dr. Murabit has over 35 years of experience in making contributions to sustainable land and water management, conservation agriculture, soil carbon sequestration, and the water, energy, food, environment nexus, a very, very substantial area. He has been the author or co-author of more than 100 peer-reviewed articles and 40 book chapters, and has led numerous national and international research initiatives. Dr. Murabit has also served as a lead author for the AFOLU chapter of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, as well as the AR6 report, and also for the United Nations Environmental Program, the GEO7. He advises a number of substantial world organizations, including FAO, the ICARTA, CIHEAM, and others. He currently serves as the International Conservation Agriculture Advisory Panel, on that panel for Africa, as the chair of the Standing Committee on Ecosystem Management and Sustainable Agriculture. And I would add, his work has been recognized by the World Association of Soil Water Conservation in the shape of the Distinguished Research Award, the King Hassan National Prize, the Council of Europe North-South Prize, and the Gulbenkian Prize for Humanity, which is a very notable list of accomplishments. With that, Dr. Rashid.
Thank you very much. Do you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, it's my.
Does everyone else see?
Yes, we can see that.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I was able to manage this. So I thank you very much for inviting me to this webinar. It's very interesting. I have followed you in the other seminars and webinars, mainly the latest one in agroforestry, which links also to conservation agriculture. So I thank you very much. I thank Adil for the connection, and also I thank all the board of World Agriculture Forum for inviting me and for giving me this opportunity. So I think my presentation should have been before my friend Saidi, but I think I will try to be more focused then. So I think the world is in core challenges that the water scarcity, climate extreme intensity, soil degradation, rising input cost, food demand, traditional intensification, and is no longer sustainable. So the climate change, I think, the land degradation, the food system and sustainability are the major challenges that are facing. But I'm not going to go on discussing the traditional conventional agriculture, so I'm going to go directly to the conservation agriculture. The conservation agriculture is mainly based on three principles. I think it was discussed earlier by Mr. Saidi, but I would like to emphasize that there are three interlinked principles that are universal, but they can be applied specifically to regions or to local farming and so on. So the first one is minimal soil disturbance. That means that we have to not disturb too much the soil, so it will be not cultivated, not tilled, not disturbed at all. So it's minimum soil disturbance as maximum. The second one is the permanent soil cover. So the soil should be covered by residue, crop residue, and by cover crop. So there is a threshold somewhere in the literature about 30% cover, but I think it's better to have more than that. The third one is the diverse crop rotation, but another way, species diversification. So not going on monocropping, but diversification as an important principle of conservation. But what is so it's there are a lot of ways of presenting conservation agriculture for and here, for example, I contrasted the one that given by CGR, the one given by FAO, but the frame sometimes is different depending on the audience, depending on the policy, depending on research, depending on practice. And I have been able to contrast several of the concept or the definitions that are so far used. For example, the FAO is using is that the CA is farming system that prevent land loss and regenerate degraded land through permanent soil cover. Here the emphasize mostly on soil health, the land restoration, but also on climate resilience. So it's morely, the audience is mostly global policy and development program. For example, the ECAF that just Saidi mentioned is the definition is that a set of locally adapted practices that protect soil, improve biodiversity, optimize yield sustainably. So it's mostly the emphasis, it go to local adaptation to biodiversity, but also productivity. And it's mostly the audience, mostly European farmers, but it's in fact is a regional policy. For example, the CGR, the group of the 15 international centers, CGR. So the definition is mainly that is a climate smart approach here, so that improve water use, that stabilize yield and support smallholder resilience. And here the emphasis is climate smart, water efficiency, and smallholder focus. And mostly it's linked to audiences in drylands and smallholder systems. There are other, for example, the EMBRAPA is mostly its conservation as a set of practices that combine soil protection, biodiversity enhancement, but also sustainable resource use adapted to Brazilian diverse biome. So it emphasizes both technical system, but also a pathway for sustainable intensification in tropical agriculture. For example, I have also CIRAD, which has as a regenerative system that builds soil fertility, reduce input, emphasize on enhancing agroecosystem services. So its audience is mostly research, but also it's linked to agroecology networks. I have the CASAM, the latest definition is regenerative and resilience production system based on ecological principles that designed to sustain productivity while restoring ecosystem functions. So it's mostly a paradigm shift and ecological principles linked together. So it's mostly, as the FAO, it's mostly global policy and development program. And in terms of academics, it's an intensive system pathways that transform agriculture towards sustainability and resilience. So it's mostly systemic change. It's knowledge intensive and the sustainability, but it's mostly the audience is research, education, and also it's important strategic planning. So if we have to compare those different concept of conservation agriculture, they have in common focus soil health resilience. They have focus on biodiversity and ecosystem services, on climate smart and sustainable intensification, and regenerative and resilient system. Some of them are globally in framing, though they are mostly on dryland resistance, the other on tropical adaptation, but they also have a sense of paradigm shift and also on agroecologic framing, but also ecological principles. So if we like to go on, I done some evolution of conservation agriculture, mainly in terms of milestones. It's the ancient practices, the traditional soil conservation that relate, for example, to terraces and agroforestry. They were doing minimum tillage. So I think that the minimum tillage come back from centuries ago. And then there are a lot of evolution in terms of practices. So, for example, before the 60s, conservation agriculture was more about soil conservation rather than integrated CA system that we know today. So the traditional practices and the Dust Bowl crisis and early conservation policies in the US were the ones that set the stage for the shift toward no-till and residue-based system pioneered by after that in Latin America. So the can show here that there was a lot of changes in the concept, a lot of changes in the way managing soils. There were, for example, in the early there were a lot of scientific awareness in 90s. So there were a lot of ability to explain why we need to shift to from conventional to no-till system or conservation system. Then from this scientific awareness, we shift from the need of the expansion to others. So it was expanded to mainly to Latin America, but still the concept of conservation tillage was also the. But that's where the modern CA has begun. Then in 60s and 70s, and mainly due to the FAO and also the CGR, CA were going more global to other places in the world. And then I think in the 2000s, they were mostly large-scale adoptions. So it goes to Australia and give you data on this, Africa to South Asia and to China. And then we are now in the climate smart era where we have as it said, more than 100 countries and more than 200 million hectares that are benefiting from conservation agriculture principles. So the mostly due to need for soil health restoration is a big issue and mainly related to carbon sequestration, to climate resilience, but also the need to water efficient or even input efficient. So there was a lot of steps in the development conservation along last century, and now I think the emerging regions will be the Mediterranean, the Central Europe, and Sub-Saharan Africa. I got this from my colleague and friend Kassam, which shows us the global CA uptake. We can see that it has gone from as low as maybe 500 hectares in ES up now to 205 million hectares. And I'm sure that in the last 5 years there was more increase on conservation agriculture as already shown for Africa, that has a tremendous increase on CA adoption. You can see here this exponential increase of CA, so the taking advantage on all aspects, as I said, mostly technological, but also systemic, need of climate resilience, need for improving livelihood of people, and so on. So the here said that the CA has offered a global opportunity around the world to all nations to transform their outdated, degrading agriculture. It's now we are talking a lot about regenerative, sustainable agriculture, climate-smart agriculture that are mostly linked also to conservation agriculture. So now we have 102 countries that have at least more than 50,000 hectares, and we have then that cover 15% of the land area, in the world land area, which is in 2018, 2019, it was 2005 million hectares of land. If we do certain, where we have the most of the conservation agriculture, I think the leading region is South America with 883 million hectares, followed by North America, that's mean US and Canada. And also, this is very important aspect for Australia. It has built up a lot of uptake on CA. Now it's 23 million hectares. It's almost 70 to 50% of land. What is important about Australia, it's a dryland country that has now very high uptake of CA. But we can also have conservation agriculture in Asia with around 18 million hectares, Russia and Ukraine with around 7 million hectares, Europe around 6 million hectares, and Africa is more than maybe 3 million, but I think now it's largely more than that. So there was great change in the compared to 2008. You can see here, for example, in Europe there is an increase by 2 times. The area in Africa is 5 times. There is a huge increase also in the Asia with 5 times, and you can see here in Russia and Ukraine is 68 times increase. In terms of percent of adoption by each region, you can see here that 68.7% of South America is under conservation agriculture, 33% in North America, and you can see here 74% on Australia and New Zealand is under the conservation agriculture, and the other regions are around 4%, which total around 15% worldwide. In terms of adoption by type of farmers or farm holdings, you can see here that 75% are either large or medium, which around 150 million hectares. That means 500,000 of farmers are adopting conservation agriculture, and the other 25% are mainly smallholders farmers, 50 million hectares, but 30 million farmers that are using conservation agriculture. This means that we have around 30.5 million farmers that are adopting conservation agriculture. They cannot be wrong. They are doing the right choice. So in my opinion, that those core principles that are generally they are global ones, but they are going in a systemic change. They are going in a system-wide change. For example, the minimal soil disturbance, it's globally linked to reduced erosion and fossil fuel, but in a broad sense, a broad social impact. It's mostly related to lower emissions, energy efficiency, which are very important for the climate change and for all aspects of mitigation and mainly to, if we can see, to Paris Agreement. So the permanent soil cover, which help us to improve the soil moisture, the moisture efficiency, and improve also, which is important, the organic carbon in soil. So it's also related to climate adaptation and climate mitigation. So it's going beyond just those metrics of soil moisture and carbon sequestration. Crop diversification are also linked to reducing pest and risk. That means that in broader social impact, they are mostly linked to economic resilience of farmers. So they are more in the ecological sense of practicing farming, and also on terms of nutrition diversity, because the quality of production will be. So those principle triggers transformation that are far beyond farmers and farms. So if we go to this timeline of conceptual evolution of conservation agriculture, we can say that it started due to erosion control, which is still now, it can be also focused. So it has focused on core and erosion control, and it has expanded to soil fertility and water conservation. For example, in the 1960s, 80s, there was mostly the innovation, the scientific base of conservation agriculture, mainly intermechanization, farmer-led adaptation. And you can see from the presentation of Saidi that mechanization is also driving the adoption and of conservation agriculture in Africa. So, and also it can be in Asia as well. In 1990s, it was mostly on sustainable intensification. So it has expanded more on the global policy framework. And then in 2000, it was mostly related to food security and food safety and food sovereignty. And then it was expanded then to agroecological adaptation. For the 2020s, it mostly the focus was on climate mitigation and resilience. So it was expanded on carbon market, on ecosystem services, in a sense that conservation agriculture has evolved from soil solving techniques to a multi-dimensional strategy for climate smart, regenerative, and integrated resource management. Its scope now includes policy, economics, biodiversity, and also SDGs. So here, just show you this in Norway. In 30s, for example, 50s, it was mostly a crisis response, but then it moved to innovation phase, and then it was mostly in scaling and diversification, and now it's mostly linked to climate smart integration, to land degradation neutrality, and all aspects of these United Nations conventions, international conventions. So now the sustainable intensification, we are in an era we have to go from how to use and to produce more and to be more efficient with less. So, and it was from the major studies that sustainable intensification is the core of conservation. So more yield per unit of water, more income per unit fertilizer, for example, or energy, more resilience per hectare, which is very important, more soil health and organic carbon per season, and also less waste and pollution and risk. So we were able to deliver more from less in terms of better water infiltration, and so higher productivity of water, soil improvement, so combating land degradation, improving nutrient cycling, higher efficiency of input and mainly fertilizer, and also lower production cost either due to energy or time saving. Now, it's also important to say that CA is also a soil-related business model. It was a soil solving model, and now it's mostly a soil-related business model. So it is transforming soil health from a productive input to a marketable assets, and allow farmers and agribusiness to generate revenue streams from the positive environment. Carbon credit and ecosystem service market is very important. It has a special input and equipment provider are created, so it get a lot of new way of using those input and equipment. And you can see that mechanization in Africa has this essence. Soil health consulting, a lot of consulting is going on, and data services. We are also in monitoring and verification services, premier food. So we would like to eat and would like to be served from healthy soils, branding. So the economic benefit of healthy CA has extended beyond the farm gate so far. So in other ways, just contrasting an old model that was input intensive to a model that is now knowledge intensive, from soil degrading to soil aggregating or soil regenerating, from climate vulnerable to climate resilience, from short-term benefit or productivity to more long-term sustainability this time. Is mostly individualistic system to community-based system, because this is very important. So CA is trying to bridge between industrial agriculture, so productivity, but also sustainable development. So in my opinion, CA is can be and should be a societal transformation pathways. So we have to think that conservation agriculture is not a farming technique or an agronomic practice, but it's a systemic transformation pathways. I think Saidi have also gone through this aspect of systemic transformation pathways, reshaping how we produce food and feed, how we use and govern our natural resources, how we integrate, organize a community, how we develop and grow our economies, and what is important as well, how to adapt our societies to climate change and increasing those extremes and not reaching a tipping point. So it represents a shift from extractive development to regenerative development. So in my opinion, CA is multi-dimensional transformation engines. It shifts rural area from high risk, low margin farming to resilience economies. It shifts the society this time from land degradation to land regeneration. It shifts farming from individual survival to collective leadership, is very important, but also collective resilience. It shifts climate vulnerability to climate adaptation capacity, and also it shifts the government, the policy for sectorial silos to nexus, to integrated landscape management rather than sectorial silos. So it's a matter of new investment, new policy. So it's food security enhancement. It's about reducing import dependence. It's about rural employment resilience. And what is important is about aligning with SDGs and climate goals. So the key message to decision maker: conservation agriculture is not initial agronomic practice is a necessary transition pathways if we want to go to a resilient food system ahead. I just gonna give you a little bit talk about some what I call them regional comparisons. So hot spots, for example, sub-Saharan Africa, as just explained by Kassam. The key constraint, residue competition from livestock, limited access to machinery, weak extension services, high soil climate variability, and insecure land tenure. But now the strategic needs is to reintegrate crop and livestock, to have to customer-high service, long-term demonstration, and also very important, the transition to finance.
Yeah.
I have very few
Well-
slides coming and we will finish. In terms of South and South Asia, the key constraint, very small farm size, crop residue burning, high labor risk, and I think the strategic is to go to residue management technology, precision irrigation or agriculture, mechanization hub, and digital advisory tool. For Latin America, Caribbean, even though those are, but now the key constraints is heavy herbicide dependence, soil compaction, rising production, environment security. So the move is mostly ecological optimization, biological weed control, and the carbon market. For in our region, North Africa and Middle East, I think these are a little bit the same as like Sub-Saharan Africa, but mechanization is more developed. But we have to go still to drought tolerance varieties, water preventing benchmark, and we still have to do a lot of policy and finance incentives. For Europe, the constraint is the herbicide restriction by EU, herbicide resistance, soil compaction, and the yield transition risk. So the systemic needs or strategic need to go to carbon farming, regenerative agriculture, digital CE integration, and private supply chains incentives. So I think the global cross-cutting constraint is that the universal constraint are short-term yield, high knowledge requirement, weak financial incentives, policy misalignment, limited long-term soil monitoring. So the key strategic message, conservation agriculture is a systemic transition, not a short-term technology. It has a good, I did try to link it to SDGs, and you can see that conventional agriculture, it's less linked, and you can now that you see that the achievement, the SDGs are not in a good track. I think CA may be a development accelerator. It links to most of the SDGs since it's knowledge intensive, soil regenerating, climate resilience, and long-term community based. I give you here the Moroccan because there was one question in the so now this is the evolution of the trend on CA in Morocco, and this year our government set up that 400,000 hectares will be this year under conservation agriculture. And you can see, for example, in 2000 we were only 50 hectares, and by the 2008 with the last green plan, we were able to reach 52 around 24,000 hectares. But with the new policy, the generation green policy, we can see that we are in exponential, even though last 4-6 years were the most dry years in record in Morocco, and still we are advancing in conservation agriculture with the idea that in 2030, not 20, will be 1 million hectares.
Thank you.
Final takeaway message: see, it's not just farming differently; it's about building a resilient society. It's a systemic pathway that reshape food production, resource governance, community organization, and climate resilience. The choice is not whether to adopt CA, but how fast we can scale it together. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Excellent, Dr. Rashid, and so many good points. Unfortunately, we're running close to the end of our allotted time for the meeting, but I would pose a couple questions quickly. and they may need to be answered offline, but there was a lot of reference both with your presentation, Rashid and Saidi, about the human side of conservation agriculture. What it means for that family, what it means for that community and stuff. I would like to offer, I think it's worth noting the value of agricultural cooperatives that are very prevalent in North America as well as Europe and many parts of Asia. They can serve as that conduit to get agronomic information out, to serve as a peer group for the smallholders, women, and for many different constituencies to join together to learn about these practices and to gain trust in implementing them. And another thing I would add quickly too, and this is to a question was posed to us at the beginning of our session from Ramona at the World Agriculture Forum headquarters about how we can possibly think about scaling or bringing more enactment of these policies. And I actually believe that ag cooperatives do serve a role. And I would also mention, as a former ag lender, if we can address risk management issues for all of these producers as they look at changing their systems, adjusting their budgets to make the investments or shift what they're doing to generate revenue, I think the management of that risk becomes important for producers of all sizes. And again, that's more of a long range type goal, but I think it's very important. So with that, are there any other comments, closing comments, Saidi or Dr. Rashid, you'd like to add?
I think you are right. In US and several places I think there was this interface between research, policy, and farmers. There was very strong interface that make the I think the high uptake of CA. Now I think in Africa and other, this interface is growing. For example, Morocco, the case to Morocco, I think the fact that the climate last 4 years, the climate of 5 years was very dry, and farmers were seeing the difference, okay, between what is produced in traditional farming and conservation farming. And also we have created an association for conservation agriculture in Morocco. We have the extension service going on. We have even the agroecology mind has impact. So it has made tremendous change, and it's gonna be across all the Africa and so on.
Thank you. Saidi, any closing comment?
Well, I would like just to say what we are finding now is cooperatives they were very powerful before, but then they failed. Now they are being revived, but what is becoming even stronger is producer organizations, not necessarily which are linked to off-takers, processors, which are linked to a market pool institution. And these are proving to be very powerful by contract farming, where processors of takers guarantee buying the produce of the farmer.
Thank you, and point well taken. I know the cooperatives have a long history and not always successful. But anyway, with that, Michelle, I believe we're at the end of our time for the session. Anything else you might add?
I think, Jeff, we've pretty much covered everything.
Okay. So with that, thank you, everyone. I look forward to our next World Agriculture Forum, and thank you to our speakers today for sharing so much valuable insight. With that, I wish you a successful and a great rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Saidi and Dr. Rashid. Thank you, Adel.
Bye-bye. Thank
Jeff.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Yeah.